This is the moment where we get to that important conversation. The Honorable Lynn Mengich is our guest tonight, and I think I'll take this opportunity to ask on behalf of the many Kenyans that have asked this, whether they read newspapers, whether they listen to news, whether they do not know. I think it's important that we hear it from the horse's mouth that you have exited already from the Salaries and Remuneration Commission.
Yes, Linda, I exited on the 11th of September.
11th of September this year.
This year, so just about.
You've had it. Because you see, my poster reads former SRC chairperson.
Yes.
And so everyone is asking, aye, she left, she left. How much time does it take to get a replacement? Do we already have a replacement?
The interviews happened last week.
Right.
Actually, early this week.
Early this week.
Yes.
And therefore, Kenyans should expect the
after
naming.
that, there is, of course, a process that, you know, it has to go to, the nominations are sent to the president, then to Parliament for vetting. If Parliament then approves the nominee, then it goes back to the president for appointment. So there is a process.
2018 up until now.
Yes.
And you get into this very crucial and delicate space for the country. And most of the people, are questioning the previous reign, but at the same time appreciating what it is that Sarah Serem did. And here you come in, and you come in when it's heated, when the members of Parliament want to have a raise in their salaries, and they actually it is claimed that they always manage to twist the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, to bow down to this kind of pressure. But luckily, on the other side of the executive, some of them say that, well, we probably do not need adjustments upwards, yet it is a requirement. How was it like for you?
Well, let me first start with what you just mentioned about that Parliament twist SRC. The truth of the matter is, in 2018, yes, when we took over, Parliament did try to raise house allowance, so they actually wanted to pay themselves a house allowance. That matter went to court, and I'm happy to report that actually the court upheld the decision of the commission, and the members of Parliament then, it is not the current Parliament, the previous Parliament, they had to refund that money.
They had to.
So to that extent, it is not true that SRC is twisted.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. It's pretty much a tight office. I'm sure you will agree to me. You will agree with what it is that I say. So what were your plans when you're getting into it, away from what is dictated by the Constitution? Because we all understand that the functions of the SRC are, clearly highlighted in the Constitution. But then most of the people will come in to specific offices, and they will have something in mind as to what they would need to change, as long as it's within the presence of law. And up until this very point, what would you say is that changing factor that you have made as it stands?
Well, the important thing, of course, is you must uphold the Constitution, and you must deliver the mandate of the Constitution.
Right.
But the how is important. So for the Commission, when we came on board in 2018, one of the very important things was the how we discharge our mandate. As you rightly say, it is clearly stated in the Constitution what we must do. But then in that process, the how becomes important, because that is when you get a lot of resistance from your stakeholders or misconceptions. So we did from the onset agree that working in collaboration with other arms of government was very important. Ensuring that we engage our stakeholders before we make decisions was important. But in doing that, still remain independent in making our decisions. And I think, Linda, that is one of the things we achieved, because what we really wanted is to ensure that the mandate of the Commission is understood. Not just by the stakeholders, the public officers who are affected, but even by the citizens themselves. So we did spend quite a lot of time to sensitize our stakeholders, like trade unions, to understand the role of the Commission. So that as we make decisions, then we lessen the objections that come to it, or the resistance that come with it. So I must say that is one of the things we achieved. And after the 6 years, we felt that, one, that the Commission's mandate is understood better than previously. But of course, we did deliver what was expected of us as a Commission. Yes.
All right. You speak of the fact that this has well been understood by the citizens. Of course, we're going to get to that sometime later. But just looking at some of the crucial concerns that were outrightly, or they were outright at the point of you getting in. Of course, we keep talking about the ballooning wage bill. We talk about, remuneration. See, most of the people actually, or most of the Kenyans then would say they would want to have that element of fairness when it comes to the aspect of remuneration. Of course, we're talking about just how best, as a country would be able to get on board, people who have good skills and actually manage to retain them, in these tough economic times, and a couple of matters or concerns in relation to productivity. Would you say that we have managed to achieve or to address some of these that would have been considered major concerns?
Yes, absolutely. Let me go one by one.
Yes.
The first one is to do with the wage bill, which you have stated that, the label is that it's ballooning. And that's always debatable. What do you mean by ballooning wage bill?
Right.
But the facts on the table is that the wage bill is way above what is stipulated in the Public Finance Management Act. The Act stipulates that not more than 35% of revenue should be spent on the wage bill. In 2018, when the Commission came on board, myself and the commissioners, it was about 51%, 51 and slightly above percent. From 35. So you can see from the onset that is a big challenge. As at last year, we were at 46%, and we are projecting actually by the end of this financial year, it will be around 40. So that you can see is a big achievement. It's gone down as a ratio of revenue. But I must say it's a very complex space because in absolute terms, the wage bill went up, right? And why is that? Kenyans may say, so why is it that on absolute terms it went up? And that's because as a developing country with a population growth that we have and a very young population, that a lot of our services have not yet reached the ratios that is required.
Right.
Essential services, when we talk about education, for example, the teacher-to-student ratio, we have not achieved the required ratios. When we look at security to population, we have not reached the required standards. Neither have we in the healthcare sector, in WHO ratios. So when you look at that, then you can see that we must continue to employ in those three sectors. So as therefore the wage bill in absolute terms will continue to rise, but then we must be worried about the ratio. Because if we spend a lot of our money in the wage bill, then you do that at the expense of development and other services. So on that score, I must say that has been a success because it's come down. And yet the country has continued to actually employ in those three sectors. So that balance, the Commission has managed to ensure that that balance is arrived at. And how do we do that? Because as you rightly say, that balance means that even as we manage that, then government must still be able to attract and retain the skills to discharge its functions. And therefore the remuneration that is advised or set by the Commission then must enable government to discharge its functions. And on that score alone, the surveys we do carry out, the Commission carries out surveys regularly to check on retention. And as at last year, the retention was over 95%. So you can see that that balance has been kept. But yes, the ratio is coming down, but in terms of retention is where it should be.
What are the key things that would be a concern before you even elaborate it further for any individual who would wish to exit the stage? If you are going to tell them that you'll remunerate them better, they perhaps are likely to, stick around and all that. So even as we speak about about the fact that we've been able to retain, you know, some of the employers or some of the skill-based individuals that we've hired. What are some of the things that need to be done so that, again, we match up the levels of remuneration to the work that is being done, if at all not surpass that? Because at the end of the day, there needs to be some element of consideration as to the quality of life, you know, even when you talk about the basics of buying power and all that. What do we need to do as a country so that we arrive at a level where even when we talk about adjustments upward, that is of remuneration, then really we are confident that we can manage the same?
You know, remuneration has to be in tandem with the economy. And at the end of the day, the question is, what can the economy afford? What can the country afford?
Okay.
So in this space of the remuneration, what is important is to continuously check what is happening in the market, and the Commission does carry out labor market surveys just to see where the remuneration is against the market.
Yeah.
But will it reach a stage where we are saying that everybody is comfortable, you know, that every employee is cushioned against cost of living? That is very difficult to achieve. Not just in Kenya, but many economies, it is difficult to achieve completely and say everyone is comfortable.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and as well remind us of this. If my memory serves me right, we get to a point where, you know, as the salaries or SRC, you know, you recommend an adjustments as dictated by the laws of the land, that there must be an adjustment upwards for the office of the president, perhaps the executive and all that. And at some point in time, the president says, well, we do not need that adjustment. And it appears as though it's a tussle between the president, who then says there's no need for an adjustment, and SRC, who says that it's a requirement of the law. What was happening there so that we get to understand this proper?
That's an interesting point, Linda. First is to say that it is not that every other time the Commission was actually recommending an increase. For the period that we were in office, in that 6 years, the first 2 years, the salaries were frozen for everybody.
Yeah.
And this was, in fact, because of the COVID-19.
Right.
So that period, there was a total freeze. There was no adjustment of the salary structures.
Yeah.
Now, then come the next phase, which was now, we call it the third and the fourth year of the review cycle.
Yeah.
That is when the Commission then reviewed the pay to be in tandem with the market. Now, at that point, you're right that the president felt that for him and the deputy, they felt strongly that they did not need an increase. But here then, Linda, we must then look at the position and the individual. Because when the Commission is looking at pay review, it's looking at the job. Yeah. So you look at the job, and we carry out market studies internationally to see where the pay of the president should be. So at that point, it is really separating between what the individual may say and what the job actually requires. But let me just say, it is a review is not always upwards. The Commission is mandated to review, yes, but it's not always upwards. In fact, for the last review, even for the positions that were reviewed, the majority of the salary structures, there was still no review. Yes, so it can be a freeze, can be a few positions that are adjusted, in some institutions all, but in quite a number actually there was no upward.
We all agree that the conversation here is not about the SRC, but then because she was the boss, it is important that we get there. Just how independent and effective is the SRC, and especially when it comes to addressing the concerns of the public, and just how much has it gone out of its way to show the public that indeed there is that need, and it is worth to have the Salaries and Remuneration Commission intact in the country?
So to start with, in terms of the public, whenever the Commission is reviewing pay for state officers, it goes through public participation. So it is a requirement in the Constitution. So at that point, the public has a say in whatever the Commission is proposing to set. So that's the first engagement with the public, and the public then gives us their views. But beyond that, continuously the Commission does have sensitization sessions with different stakeholders to ensure that there is understanding from the public, from the stakeholders on what is required of the Commission. But I know you've also asked a question about the independence of the Commission. I just feel it's important to explain that as well. That, you know, in Chapter 15 of the Constitution, that is where SRC is established. And it's not just SRC, there are other constitutional commissions and independent offices, commonly referred to as Chapter 15 commissions and offices. They are given independence. What does that independence actually means is that they do not take direction from anyone. And therefore the decisions made by these commissions must be independent. But independence does not mean that you do not collaborate with other stakeholders. So there is an element of interdependence, but there is also independence in decision making. So it is then required that there is an element of, you know, interdependence with other arms of government. Yes.
All right. This is Chapter 15, Chapter 12?
Chapter 15.
Chapter 15, Chapter 15. And then, of course, SRC falls under 230A. I almost thought it's Chapter 12. I don't know why. I must have lost that, but all the same, we're here. And, of course, hearing it from the horse's mouth. So, as we perhaps close on this chapter of SRC, I would not want to know just how it feels, you know, having picked it from your predecessor and what you think you did different, but perhaps to that one that will take it up. What are some of the things that you perhaps feel they need to seal as loopholes? And maybe as a country, would it be important to perhaps review the ways that we pick the commissioners, or that is in order?
For the commission, SRC is slightly different from all other commissions because the Constitution clearly stipulates how the nominations are done. They are representative of different bodies. So the commission has a representative of Federation of Kenya Employers, a representative of COTU, a representative of Teacher Service Commission, National Police Service Commission, Public Service Commission, Judiciary Service Commission,
Senate, parliamentary,
county government. So to that extent, you can see that actually it picks all the key stakeholders. So I don't think one would say, should we change that composition? And then of course, government also has nominees from the National Treasury, the CS, National Treasury, Attorney General, Minister of Public Service. It's very inclusive and it's intentional so that the perspectives from all these other employers and other interested institutions are brought on board. So I think for me, when I look back, even having chaired the commission, it is the right thing
procedure to take.
It is the right procedure to take. Yes.
All right. So here we are, and we are looking at you as a HR, and I mean, people would be curious. Perhaps this question should come last, but let it come now. Just what are the plans after this? Or sometimes then you must, I mean, you have held positions in different quarters, you know, the private sector. This has gotten you to the level of the public sector or perhaps the government, and people are curious. I mean, by the time it is the last year, you are beginning to think, no, what next and all that, what is the plan and everything. Is it true that you have been approached for something else so far?
Well, yes, in terms of what are my plans, when I look back, yes, I do have private sector experience. Most of my experience was in private sector. I must say I loved working for the public sector because it is really a service that you give to the country. So as I look back, combining my experience, both private, public sector, and chairing a commission, and my past experience also in different boards, what is next for me really is to really use some of the skills that I've acquired throughout my career in 3 areas. Right. One for me would really continue in boards. I think there is a lot of value in either serving as a chair or a member or a board. It's got a lot of impact for this country. So that's one area that I will continue serving in different organizations. Now the other one, which, you know, a year ago, I did see that I need to think about something different that I haven't done. So I'm now a certified mediator.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. And that to me is an area that I think will really make an impact in this country.
Okay.
Judiciary is now more and more talking about alternate dispute resolution. And
yes.
mediation is one of those. And having been in a space where there is a lot of conflict, you know, there is a lot of room for mediation.
That's true.
So I also want to spend my time looking at mediation as something that I can do. And of course, you know, I'm not closing myself to any opportunities that may arise in the public sector. I would love to, if opportunities arise, I would still serve. So that's where I am.
All right, we must come to a close, but then not before you tell us, what do you make of the public vis-a-vis the private sector, that most of the times would wake up and say, you know, this entity that is under the public sector should perhaps be accorded to the private sector so that it's run well and everything. What is this that we miss out on when, you know, running the activities of the public sector, such that sometimes we tend to appreciate what is in the private sector more?
One of the things that having come from private to public is there is a misconception a lot of the time that people in public service don't have a lot of work, you know, or they don't necessarily excel.
Okay.
I must say that is not entirely true.
Right.
I did find that there are a lot of public officers really hardworking, doing their job. The big difference you find is that in the private sector, it is very easy to measure your impact because you're talking numbers.
Okay.
So you can easily say you made a profit, you didn't make a profit, you did this, you know, it's numbers. When it comes to public service, it is not as easy to measure your impact. And therefore, when you say, you know, what is not happening, then it is not a very easy answer.
Okay.
But having said that, I do agree that there is a lot that needs to change a bit in the private sector in the way performance management is done.
Okay.
The approach to performance management is slightly different than in the private sector.
Right.
I think public sector is a lot more forgiving if you don't perform. The consequences are not as dire as in the private sector.
Okay.
So that element can be improved. The standards of performance also could be higher. But again, that's very general because, as I said, I have come across institutions in the private sector who are really performing, but it's not cutting across.
Yeah.
So that is where improvements need to be there so that the citizens can actually feel the impact. We've got to be more purposeful to say, is what public sector doing actually speaking to the citizens?
Right.
Is it impactful? And how can we measure that impact so that you can always actually say, yes, what I'm doing, I can see the results, I can feel the outcome.
That we have policies and they're being implemented.
Yes.
All right. Yes. As we come to a close, speaking to the lady out there, perhaps in 30 seconds, to the girl out there who is watching you, what is this one thing that you tell them tonight in terms of, you know, just getting into this murky waters, tight spaces, and, you know, coming out a victor?
I would say to young girls, you know, even those who are in school and those who are already in the workplace, that actually there is a lot that women can do. Research has shown that women have certain characteristics in them that actually plays a lot in a positive way in the workplace.
Yeah.
And just to mention a few, Linda, so that I don't close over this, is there are innate characteristics, you know, like empathy,
right,
emotional intelligence that women have, and being able to perceive situations from a different manner.
Right.
And some of these characteristics actually play a lot, especially in places like the boardroom, where women are able to add enormous value to what is happening. So I would say then to the women, the young girls, that although sometimes these spaces tends to have challenges, but nothing should stop anyone from actually putting their foot forward and being the best that they can be. And it is possible, it's doable, and women should actually take up more positions.
All right, the Honorable Lynn Mengich, it's been an honor having you albeit for such a short time. We wish you nothing but the best in the next chapter. And we'll be watching, because then our business is to learn for those or from those who have come ahead of us or who are on a mission ahead of us. Thank you so much as well for keeping us company, as well for the immense feedback, but we must exit the stage and pave way for Shitter Boy in a bit. My name is Linda Lela. It was good having you. Bye-bye. Thank you.